So welcome to another session of Diffusion Live. This time we've got Priyanka Desai, who is the VP of Operations at OpenLaw and lead ops for the LAO and Flamingo DAO. So the reason why we're going into the topic of DAOs today, the title is Web3 Governance from DAOs to LAOs, from decentralized autonomous organizations to legal autonomous organizations. And the opening premise is that DAOs have evolved a lot since when most people might have kind of last checked in with the DAO at a number of levels, both in terms of the infrastructure and tooling that's available, but as well as the kind of thinking that's been applied from a liabilities, risk management perspective. And increasingly, a lot of innovations happening policy side around things like code is law. So a lot of that has been driven by pressure following 2017 with ICOs, the regulatory burden and pressure to be decentralized. So, of course, how do you become decentralized? When is the appropriate point? There is nobody better to talk about this than Priyanka and all the great work that they're doing at OpenLaw. So welcome to the show, Priyanka.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. How's it going?
So, it's going good, and I'm really happy to have you on. I actually recorded a podcast with Aaron, the founder of OpenLaw, just yesterday, so I'm unusually well prepared for the show, and we'll hopefully be able to go through quite a bit of the nuance with you. We're only got half an hour show because you've got a call quickly afterwards, so we've got a lot to get through, to rattle through. We're really appreciative of your time. So let's just get straight into it. It would be great if you could give us a brief history of DAOs from the DAO to now.
Awesome. Yeah. I guess just to level set here, a DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. I like to think of it as like a Web3 organization, meaning like basically collecting people through capital or other means via blockchain technology, having smart contracts operate in the back end, having some sort of governance through decentralized voting, things of that nature. And I think that's sort of a killer app of Ethereum and this technology in general. Folks saw this early. It's kind of hard to forget in the history of Ethereum, but I think was it May 2016, there was the DAO, which was pretty novel, and at the time raised close to $153 million. Folks were super excited. It was this notion of pulling together capital like water and then having the members of that DAO through a token vote on what projects to fund. So, like I said, it raised tons of money. I think I recall reading something in Bloomberg about it. It was really, really early on in the tech stack, and people really believed in this notion of kind of decentralizing venture capital in many ways. So that was pretty successful in concept. In practice, there were a few technical issues. I mean, the technology admittedly was quite new at the time. And it encountered what most people consider the DAO hack, the famous DAO hack, where there ended up being a lot of drama around hard forking it and getting money back, et cetera. So outside of some of those issues on the technical side, there was also some issues on the legal side. So there was no legal structuring involved with the original DAO, and de facto, without legal structuring, everyone becomes a general partner of this organization and thus could be personally liable. So, there's some legal issues at play, some technical issues at play, but the fundamental idea, this idea of pooling capital like water and having individuals who pool their respective amount of capital vote on which projects to vote on, to fund, is super compelling and interesting to people. So that was the original DAO. After that kind of major milestone in the Ethereum community, there was a little bit of trepidation and cooling around DAOs, I would say. I feel like, we've had Aragon and other frameworks really pushing the DAO concept forward, but for the most part, it's been like a slow climb from that point. I think the technology had matured, and we really started seeing that DAO conversation pick up again. Like, I want to say at least, early 2019, I really feel like, the DAO conversation started picking up. We had Moloch DAO, I believe that was May 2019, come up with its framework. And, us on the OpenLaw side, just thinking about the DAO, we've always been fans of what the folks at Aragon are doing. We saw what Moloch was doing. Conversation of DAOs started re-energizing it and getting folks excited again. We on the OpenLaw side have like the legal acumen and the toolkit to really at least help with the legal structuring, and the technology has matured. So why not really kind of push along and create legally compliant DAOs that limit each individual's liability, so we don't necessarily run into issues with the original DAO. We're seeing DAO frameworks now, across the board, Compound, other DeFi protocols, Aragon, really pushing the needle there. And Moloch, of course, which is the framework that we use, really kind of changing the ecosystem when it comes to DAOs. So, from now to then, there was definitely a cooling and then just a revving up, and now we're like fully there. And there's tons of work to do, but we're definitely pushing that forward too.
Yeah, so before we go into OpenLaw, and there's two aspects to that. One is OpenLaw, the company that you work at, that you lead operations, and then OpenLaw as a principle. And again, I have the benefit of having spoken to Aaron yesterday to understand a lot of the principles and thinking around that. But before we go into that, it'd be good to just understand in your mind, what was the step change that Moloch DAO brought to the DAO space? Because I think that was the first DAO that came on my radar since the DAO, and it clearly picked up a lot of traction. It kind of, in a way, as you say, created a framework that a lot of people are borrowing from or evolving. Could you just talk us through the step change, some of the constituent parts that were different?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really necessarily speak to like the technological kind of differentiations of why that is, but from talking to folks, really seeing what the appetite is with Moloch and how it kind of really pushed things along was just frankly like the ease of use. Like people found it super easy to use. It was pretty simple. We on our side helped with their team and a couple others extend the Moloch DAO contract from grant to make it more venture style. And so it was pretty, straightforward to do. There was some key functionalities that people have learned from, like, for example, with governance, you don't necessarily need a quorum. There's some nice features there that make it pretty simple to use, and some nits that have been figured out. So, Moloch was an excellent framework, and we're really grateful for that, because I think that really did shift the conversation when it came to DAOs early last year.
Yeah, and as you said, that then inspired, the framework inspired what you did with the LAO, and I think it'd be good to talk about the difference between a LAO and a DAO. But of course, Moloch also inspired things like Metacartel and various other forms of community-driven venture that are now beginning to kind of specialize into different investment categories like gaming or what have you. And I think there's an interesting blending of gaming culture and clans and stuff like that, and of course what we're seeing around DAOs. But could you just talk us through the difference between a DAO and a LAO, and then we're going to jump into OpenLaw?
Yeah, totally. So the DAO was, at a fundamental level, like I said, that whole notion of pooling capital and democratically voting based on a hive mind of individuals, not different from like an efficient market hypothesis type of idea, is very compelling. So from that vantage point, it's not really any different. I would say that the legal framework is quite different. As I mentioned with the DAO, you ran into that there was really no legal framework. So you ran into this default where everyone becomes a general partner that's personally liable, and you run into a ton of issues there. What we've done with the LAO is limit everyone's liability. So everyone is a limited, member of this organization. I think it actually differs from a venture style traditional fund as well, where you have like a general partner and a limited partner. There's really none of that. It's entirely member managed like the original DAO. We just have, the proper operating agreements, subscription agreements, basically, doing all of the paperwork to make sure that everyone is protected if something were to go wrong. Yeah, I mean, the operationally as well. I mean, we make decisions. The DAO, unfortunately, we never got to see that really succeed, but I think the vision is not so dissimilar to like what we saw with Coinbase and Mt. Gox. And we've used this analogy a lot, but I really like it to explain where we're going and what the objective was. Is like, Coinbase is great. I think it's probably one of the foremost companies that have pushed the crypto forward for most, retail and other even institutional people. And I think many folks, early Coinbase folks, saw what was happening at Mt. Gox, saw that there was clear product market fit, saw that there was clear market demand, but it was the Wild West. And so seeing that framework and trying to work with the confines of the law really pushed its success, and working with regulators, fitting it into the mold, which isn't like fun per se, but trying to make it work within the confines of the law. So like limited liability company, registering that in Delaware, having accredited investors, making sure all the tax information, K1 stuff is sent out. All of those kind of painful touch points we've really handled for folks. Accredited investors, not my favorite standard, but it's unfortunately what we have to deal with, try to like push something like this along in the real world and make it super effective and have people feel protected. So objective, not dissimilar, but in practice, just working within the confines of the law.
Yeah, and I guess it's also, from what I understand, building on established precedent, right? So as I understand it, the LAOs and LLC, as you say, like a partnership structure, these things are very familiar, well-worn path with precedent for the pooling of capital and deployment of capital, management of capital. As you say, this kind of jurisdictional selection. So rooting a DAO in a jurisdiction means that, at least in theory, that you can have what's called forum selection. So you can select, should there be arbitration, where that would happen, rather than if it's just a bit of code on the internet. In principle, you could say that code is law, but if somebody has a problem with that, they in theory could take you to court wherever they're domiciled, including Saudi Arabia, Russia, UK, France, wherever. So having as a Delaware corp, with very clear forum selection, allows for you to kind of root that within a set jurisdiction. And of course, what's interesting is with DAOs, you're starting to see the jurisdictions that they're using in the same environments where I guess a lot of hedge funds are being based and what have you, kind of global capital, as you say, that's very fluid, that's moving in and out of different markets. And you're starting to see a lot of policy formation, which can make code law, i.e. what is executed in a contract could be regarded as the final thing. So you're going to have less claimants, I guess, or arbitrage, people taking people to court if they don't like the outcome. So let's go into open law, because this fascinated me. The idea of thinking about law in the context of open source and contracting.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is where the inspiration of where open law came from is the idea of making sure that people's rights and obligations are accounted for, even when you're using this technology. So just to kind of touch on that a little bit and pull on what you were saying, smart contracts are like an epic novel creation that we're all really excited about, and I think are going to provide a ton of operational efficiency, and there's just the possibilities and the effect of that is tremendous. We're seeing that now, but in certain circumstances, particularly if you're like interacting with the real world, would that be like digitizing and tokenizing real property or something like that, and pulling that into this ecosystem, you're going to have some sort of like legible, readable document that is tied to the smart contract and actually gives that real property some rights and obligations. So that's really where OpenLaw comes in. You want to document that using our what we've created, a protocol which provides a legal wrapper around these smart contracts is the term I'd like to use. So using OpenLaw, really you can take any legal contract, mark it up in our domain specific markup language, embed a smart contract in that agreement, and then both parties can sign. That signature also gets executed. So you almost have like a DocuSign meets, smart contract and legal wrapper around it. The smart contract gets called and you're done. And so, that's pretty critical, especially when we're talking about bringing real world assets on chain. I think that this is going to be a very component piece to that. Because even as you mentioned, I mean, there's some clauses like choice of law, where you're going to dispute this. You don't want to necessarily leave that up to the courts if a dispute were to arise. Same with, we saw over COVID, a lot of companies and others, put in a force majeure clause to work, in case something happens to cancel the contract and others, and you can't necessarily like code that in a smart contract. So there's definitely some intangible benefit of having a contract or legal wrapper around smart contracts.
Yeah, great. And I understand, of course, the fact that these contracts then become machine readable means you can increasingly have automated markets and things can be resolved quickly, including potentially arbitration. You could have an issue for how that could be resolved on chain. So let's go into the brilliant work that you guys are doing at OpenLaw. As I said at the beginning, you yourself are directly involved in operationalizing both the LAO and the Flamingo DAO. Could you talk us through both of those as case studies?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the LAO is really an ode to the DAO, and so we launched that at the end of April. We have close to 55 members. The membership ranges from protocol founders, developer types, to venture capital folks, both crypto VCs or traditional VCs who are interested in crypto and are kind of learning more about the space, to individuals who have been a part of the Ethereum ecosystem, helping projects on the ground floor, people from the foundation, others who are really trying to push this ecosystem forward. So, that has been moving really well. I think since we launched, there's been close to 30 investments at this point. The general check sizes range between 50 to 250K, all in ETH. We're all very ETH native. To join, you contribute ETH, the projects get ETH, and that's kind of how we operate. It's interesting, given the diversity of members, people are constantly, interested in what's emergent in this space. Folks have been playing around with DeFi for a while, so there's been quite a few of those investments. We've also had stuff in the personal token space, which is heating up, in the social token space, a lot of interest there, NFTs, digital art. So, I think the thesis of having different people from different backgrounds, different life experiences and impressions of, where they've been in crypto, blockchain, life, tech general, has put out like what I think a great portfolio. And not to mention the project support that you get too. You have this group of folks that are advocating for your project. We have mentors that support the projects. It's a great way for founders to get to know other founders. So it's, beyond just the DAO making decisions itself, there's a human element. It's been really interesting and fun to see the members of the LAO get along with each other and work together on separate things, even outside of the LAO. It's been great to see the founders work together on their projects, seeing certain LAO members show interest in certain LAO-funded projects. It's been just such an amazing process to be a part of, and talking, seeing like the mind meld between members, founders, mentors. It's kind of been a privilege to work for. So that's been pretty interesting. And I think through that, as you mentioned, Like the LAO has leaned into the NFT space for a while. Like one of our first investments was in a project called Super Rare, which is amazing, great team. And they, you know, there's been a group within the LAO that has been focused primarily on NFTs. There was this notion of purchasing NFTs, and then, you know, the bigger idea of, well, why don't we start a DAO that's primarily focused on this space? And it's wild, like we started talking about that towards the end of the summer, and then the whole NFT space just has just garnered so much attention, which is very exciting. And so we have an entirely different group of people, folks who are, you know, well versed in the NFT space. So this is Flamingo. They are interested from everything from digital artwork to collectibles to you know, virtual land, building out a digital museum on virtual land, you know, fractionalizing some of the work. So there's a lot of interesting concepts you can do with, because an NFT is like a hard non-fungible token, of course. So once you actually acquire it, there's plenty of fun stuff you can do when it comes to display or fractionalization or lending it out or plugging it into DeFi and such. So that's been kind of different than the LAO, but another vertical where a community can come together, bring their expertise and interest, and start just playing and experimenting and supporting different pieces of that specific niche in an ecosystem. And so, you know, we're thinking about that. We're thinking about extending that beyond to other DAOs as well. So, I mean, we have the LAO, we have Flamingo. We've been thinking about other verticals, if you will, for lack of a better word. You know, having communities support that as well. And I think there's a lot to learn on both sides there. So that's a little bit about the DAO Flamingo. I'm happy to unpack any of that. I know I kind of said through that.
Yeah, I definitely want to use kind of last 5 minutes to deep dive into functionally how, let's say, the LAO operates. I think it's also worth just saying that, you know, this concept about how you know, especially in such a complex space as Web3, I can speak at Outlier as a pre-seed accelerator, the amount of things that you have to track, it's an almost impossible task. You know, we've got 20 plus people here full time, and we still can't, as a group of people, you know, fully analyze everything, especially at the very early stages of an initiative where there's perhaps not that many data points. So I think, you know, leveraging a network to both consume, ingest, synthesize information, and then act upon it is you know, clearly a more effective way to do it than a hierarchical corporation. So functionally, how does that happen? Because I totally buy. It's great for discovery. You know, it's great for the synthesis of information. But how do you then act on that as a collective? You know, is there a threshold? You know, what is the process? How do you resolve difference of opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this would, maybe I'm going to go into too much detail here, but I mean, generally the way it works is like someone will either find something interesting on Twitter, because let's be honest, that's, you know, the breeding ground for crypto, or, you know, they'll find something through their network, they'll share it with their group. Some people may or may not have heard of it. There's definitely like a conversation. We'll open up a Discord channel, discuss that. You know, I myself or someone from the LAO will have a connection or want to talk to the founders to get a sense of what's going on with the project, where they are. And then there could be a follow-up with all of the members that's recorded. So people who can't make it, because we have members from every time zone, checking in on the video after. At that point, like, you know, we have, like I said, there's like a large group of folks who are all respectively experts in their field. So everything from like a software developer who wants to kind of look at, peruse the code, someone from the business side or product side that maybe wants to talk to the team about possibly ways to take the product, which, you know, we've done on a few occasions. It really, we've also kind of put together mentors and certain projects that we think may need help in certain ways. So, I mean, if there's, I mean, to your point, I mean, yes, you have a team of 20, there's a team here who all have different experiences. And so they kind of can pull in and ask questions. They all also kind of do a lot of surfing and play. They're folks who play around so aggressively in this space that they kind of just know when something's good. They like know about a team. So I guess it's somewhat gut. Some people also just are have a skill set or just word of mouth. And so from there, if folks are excited about it, there's some internal polling on Discord. If there seems like general appetite, that proposal would be put up for vote. There's a 1-week voting period. If there are more yes votes than no votes, then that capital is locked in. It goes to the project. And then after that point, and I think this is interesting for folks who aren't familiar with Moloch or DAOs in general, there's a 1-week grace period, which gives members the opportunity to rage quit or leave the fund entirely. So, for example, if there's a project that you're vehemently against funding, but it goes through, you can take any undeployed capital with you and leave the fund entirely. And so, I mean, of course, you can't just pick and choose which investments you have exposure to. You're either all in or out. And so that rage quit functionality does offer a level of fluidity in general, but you can leave if you want. And, in that 1-week rage period, after that 1-week rage quit or grace period, as we call it, ends, the project gets funded, all the legal stuff takes place, and that stuff gets executed. The project takes their ETH, and we have them just join the LAO network. So we'll get them in our mentor founder calls. We have a little founder telegram. So it's a nice, from there, and also the LAO members have been checking in on projects and seeing the growth, every so often. So it's kind of, I think, a really novel approach. And what's kind of neat about it from a member perspective is because it's not like a typical LP GP relationship that you find in a venture fund. A lot of these members will see a project with the LAO funds and reach out and invest on their own because they think it's awesome. So it's kind of this open way of just discovering and investing in projects.
And so is there already a threshold that you're thinking of, the amount of people that you'll let into a DAO for it to function in an optimal way? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, so we're bound to 100 members by law. But I mean, yeah, so I mean, you could imagine though, if you wanted more participation, like a DAO being a member of a DAO being a member of a DAO, although of course you'd be pretty diluted at that point if you had a piece of that. But I mean, you could kind of work around that way. But yeah, I mean, at least from my vantage point, kind of running the ops, we have about 55 now, and there is a proposal to increase it and add up to 100 members. I mean, I would imagine, I think I read this in Sapiens, it's easy to manage anything below 150 people. So I would imagine that 100 is probably a good amount. That's when I think you can be effective in decision making. There's not too many voices in the room.
Yeah, I would agree. I think generally that feels like a natural threshold. Look, Priyanka, thanks so much for coming on. Again, I want to be respectful of time. I know you're very busy. Certainly, from my recording that I had with Aaron the other day, there were several opportunities I want to follow up from our portfolio. They're all exploring DAOs in terms of some form of collaboration with the OpenLaw organization. So hopefully get to collaborate with you at some point in the future. Thanks for coming on, and good luck with Flamingo DAO and the LAO.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.